afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the South Gloucestershire Business Insight Show down in South Gloucestershire today. And thank you for joining us for this business risk and resilience discussion. I'm Steve Gardner-Collins. I'm Director of Visit Gloucestershire, and I'm Sales Director of the Hatton Collection. And I'd firstly like to invite our panel to introduce themselves. So if I just open up the screen again. Guy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Guy Timson. I wear quite a few hats down in the Southwest, one of which is I'm Sponsorship Director for the Bristol Balloon Fiesta, and I also run my own business called Channel Force, which is lead generation, helping you get closer to your new customers. So good afternoon.
Great, thanks, Guy. Roger, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Roger McCrill. I run a couple of companies, and the main one is Sabre UK Limited here in the Cotswolds. We operate with companies moving in on facilitating their move into India, China, or Asia. I'm here today to support the discussion on business resilience.
Great, thanks, Roger. And Eva, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Eva Túnez Salvador and I'm the Director of Genuine Translations, which is a multilingual translation company based in Cheltenham, the UK. And I'm also the co-founder of Local to Global, which is a gateway to fulfill all exporters' linguistic, cultural and branding requirements. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me today.
Pleasure, thanks for joining us. Mana, would you like to introduce yourself? I don't know if Mana can hear us actually. Okay. Oh, there he is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Introduce yourself for us.
Good afternoon, all. Apologies for the slight technical issues around my end. Mana Singh, South Gloucester Council Economic Development Team. My main role is working and supporting and delivering various different business support programs for businesses in and around South Gloucester Council. South Gloucester County.
Thanks, Mana. Slowing down at your end, but we'll keep going. So we're here today to talk about business risk and resilience. And what's often probably a good place to start is it's come about from coronavirus particularly, and recovery and risk and resilience is something that we all need to consider for the future. So it's an open question really to begin with, and we'll work around the room. But from your perspective, what do you consider risk and resilience to be? And I'll start with Roger. What is risk and resilience from your perspective, and what do you think your approach to it would be?
Well, I think there are fundamentally two elements. One is business continuity and the other one is business risk and resilience. Continuity fundamentally is when you've got a situation that's occurred and you need to keep continuity of your business operating. It's generally at an operational level of the business to maintain whatever needs to be maintained. For example, with the coronavirus, we've had real problems on shipping out of Asia into the UK, and it's meant that we've had to modify our supply chains to suit that coming into the UK. Business resilience is more about strategic thinking as to how in future you will look at the various elements that may or may not affect the business. And those elements need to be studied at the board level and assessed as to what their effect will be or might be on the business. Those are the two elements that really make up risk and resilience. It's interesting to note there is a document, I don't know if you've all seen it, from the World Economic Forum, the Global Risk Report 2019-20, where they list likelihoods and impact. And it's very interesting to note that the biggest impact they've got is in fact the risk of world war in terms of the situation that may create. But that's an extreme situation. But basically, strategically, we need to look at resilience in a way that affects the business in the long term and try and anticipate and use the tools to assess how that resilience can be managed.
Thanks, Roger. Guy, your perspective on risk and resilience?
Well, if you look at it on the SME point of view, right at the low level, kind of like sole traders, micro businesses, risk can be something that hits just extremely suddenly, or it can be something that, the risk wasn't there a day ago and it is now. It's something that you couldn't plan for. An ideal example would be just over a year ago, or just under a year ago, with leisure and hospitality, for instance. So one of the things that I guess the last year has potentially taught us is how to plan for some of these things in the future. Because tons and tons of people did an absolutely wonderful job of getting their acts together in March and April and May during the first lockdown and came out with great credit, whereas an awful lot of people did unfortunately have to fold their businesses because they didn't have any sort of plan A or plan B or plan B or plan C. Now, I'd use the balloon fiesta myself as an example, where this time last year we were looking at, plan A, fine. 8th of August, Thursday the 8th of August, we'll open the gates. We'll have about 500,000 people in over 4 days. We'll do 3 risings, we'll do 4 ascents, we'll do night close, we'll do all of these sorts of things. Then bang, everything stopped. And with, with social distancing and everything, we were not able to do anything apart from a fly past and a virtual nightclub. Whereas this year, what we're doing, because we've got the benefit of all the time we've been able to put in on how to mitigate the risk should something happen, should we go back into lockdown and everything like that, we now are presenting to our customers a plan A, plan B and plan C. And that's how we can build up our resilience to anything that might happen further down the line, by building in all the risk factors within that planning. So for me, it's being able to learn from everything, because quite often you don't know something's going to be a risk until it happens. Anyone who's a parent here will absolutely know that. So it's literally just trying to plan in and trying to be agile enough when something does happen so that you can be as resilient as possible.
Great, thanks, Guy. Eva, what do you think on risk and resilience at this stage?
So I like to think about risk and resilience from a personal point of view as well, so not just business, because I think they are very well connected. So a risk is a situation involving exposure to danger. In business, basically, it's doing something that could lead to win or lose outcome. And resilience is how well you recover from that difficult situation, or how tough you are, really. So as an example, when just before the first lockdown, I decided to run my business full-time. I had been running it part-time since 2014. And obviously when the pandemic started, I was a bit hesitant whether I should take that risk or not. But I decided to take it anyway. And then the resilience will be how tough I've been through these months with all the uncertainty like everyone else. And at the same time, I've been able to run my business and have an income every month, which I'm very grateful for. I think innovation is quite linked to it as well, in the way you react and think about different ways to solve any problem.
Great, thanks, Eva. Manor, any perspectives from you, certainly from South Gloucestershire perspective, on risk and resilience?
Yeah. I mean, I echo what my colleagues have just said about risk and resilience, and those same interpretations. I have those as well. I can't add anything else new, but what I would like to say is that what this pandemic, what this lockdown has done, has brought the whole issue of risk and resilience, to right in front of us. And if any of those, what it has done is forced businesses, forced organizations to really have a look at their day-to-day operations, their businesses, from every aspect, from, finance, from the day-to-day operations, from personnel, from HR policies. It's forced business owners to really have a look and evaluate what their situation is, because this, as I said, the pandemic situation has is like a bombshell. It's just dropped on us, and those businesses are suffering right now are those that, in a sense, didn't have any policy, didn't have any resilient planning in place. Whether you're a small corner shop or whether you're a multinational business, the aviation sector, for example, have suffered from this. So, as I said, my point of view is that businesses have suffered across the board. This, though, still presents an opportunity for certain sectors to have really adapt to the different market changes that they find themselves in. And I'll give you a very small example. I was speaking to a small restaurant owner, pizza owner, and in South Gloss, had a business, obviously had to close down during the first lockdown. And what they did over the summer months was that they began producing their pizzas in their house. So they were able to adopt those same operations in their home environment. And they were selling 100 plus pizzas a week, and were able to still continue their business. So they were able to adapt to the marketplace. So that's a very small example of a small SME business, something which Guy mentioned earlier, from that perspective. Being reactive and being proactive at the same time, having those plans in place. So that's my take, and that's the kind of conversations and feedback I'm getting from businesses. Certain businesses are suffering and they haven't been able to adapt simply because they don't have any planning or policies in place, whereas others have been able to do that.
Great, thanks, Mana. My work within the visitor economy, certainly as a hotelier, has presented itself, this pandemic, as an eye-opener to the sector of how unprepared or underprepared it was. When we talk about our accommodation and our ticket prices, how we've gone through years of low pricing. And I think the problem with closing down the sector through the last 3 lockdowns is that the cost of closing us down is because our margins are so tight and so small. And something that I'm working on at the moment is the value of visitor and visitor experience. We need to actually, we need to become ambassadors for British holidays. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if when you are not going abroad on holiday, when somebody says to you, what are you doing for your holiday this year? And you often reply with, oh, we're just going camping in Devon. It's almost like the slumming answer of not being able to go abroad this year. And when you think about having that relationship with your own country, we actually need to own it and be passionate about it. Much as the way, I like to think in my job, I'm passionate about my hotels, and I'm passionate about Gloucestershire, and I'm passionate about the destination. And you want people to be passionate as well. But if you're slumming it going camping, then you're not really coming across like you're a great place, a luxury place to come on holiday. And this is where we need to change the perception of a UK holiday, so that we actually become a destination. Guy?
Yeah, because that's the thing, that if you ask people that, they say, oh, we're just going camping in Devon. They might be using a tent in a field in Devon as a base, but they're not just going camping in Devon.
No.
If they're just coming out of London camping, or to a B&B in the Cotswolds or in the Mendips or somewhere like that, they're wanting to go out and see everything that area's got to offer. So you're absolutely right. We're ambassadorial for everything as a whole. The hotels and the Airbnbs, the campsites, the caravan sites and everything like that, they're a base point.
Yeah.
From that point of view. And I guess people are kind of like using it as, oh, we're only doing that. That is them mitigating their risk on holiday, by not flying abroad, by, not doing the big expansive trips that they would have done last year or the year before. And now it's up to us to say, well, listen, you're not mitigating your risk. You're just coming to a new place that you've never experienced before, and you might want to come to as your second holiday base for years to come. You might want to buy a property in the area. You might want to retire here. Everything starts at the start on that side. And I think it's a massive opportunity for us to just say, hey, listen, South Gloucestershire, Bristol, Gloucester, everywhere around, it's a marvellous part of the world. And, you don't know it well enough. So you need to come in more than once for a start. But that would be my take on it.
Yeah, it's that interconnected, that web of how important visitor experience is. Because we're all visitors when we step out of our house and we go to visit somewhere. And I always think that we need to think hyper-local, but also really appreciate the value of where we choose to live. And the fact that we live here means we should be passionate about it and want to share that with people that become tourists. Roger, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's an underselling of the UK in general, and the West Country, Gloucestershire and the Bristol region and the Cotswolds in particular. You see lots of international visitors previously coming around. It's quite quiet now, obviously, with the lockdown. And certainly one hopes that by the time we open up, we've got a situation where the visitor economy is focused on developing the region. However, coming back to the comment on business resilience and continuity, because continuity is what we're looking for, we've had a marvellous opportunity to understand how things went wrong. A marvellous opportunity to see the risks that we've now encountered and the outcome of those risks. Unfortunately, as Guy said, we've seen many companies disappear. So planning is the key to what we're talking about. Planning not only to bring the visitors into the economy again, but equally understand and encourage both SMEs, even be it on a very simple basis, to plan and think about how resilient can they make their business. I think Eva made the comment on innovation. Innovation has been the lifeblood of many industries. It's been the lifeblood of some of the importing and exporting businesses we deal with, in changing the way we work, in changing the mode of operation. We've seen people working from home. Obviously, things are going to change, but surely we need to have a platform so that we can maybe help people to understand where's that and how do you plan for the future? Because sure enough, it's going to come again.
Yeah, and absolutely. What we're talking about here is resilience. The way we're talking in the conversation points that we're making is building our resilience to how we see things and put things into perspective. I wrote down stress test earlier, and never before has business been stressed as much as it has and stretched. And as is government right now in terms of its grants and its loan, it's completely stressed and stretched. And as the virus evolves and maybe mutates and becomes a new variant, how sustainable is it in terms of building our resilience? How soon can we start to build resilience? We're starting it now in terms of what we're saying, but how we put that into practicality is what's next. Guy?
Yeah, I think it circles back around to what I was saying about having a plan A, a plan B and a plan C. And being able to be agile enough to move between them should the necessity arise, driven by the various different regulations that may be put in place, sometimes with hours notice rather than a few days. You look at, as an example, if you look at the Isle of Man was great, opened up, pubs were open, everything was open, circuit break lockdown yesterday, 3 hours notice. So everyone that had opened up and had just got up and running, had just got all their staff working in all of their establishments again, getting them used to everything, bang, they're done for 3 weeks again. And that's the sort of thing that will affect obviously some companies far more than others, and some companies within the leisure industry and within the hospitality industry and everything cannot really have that much of a plan C, but they can have a plan B. So that's one of the importances, and it goes back to Ava. It's kind of like engendering that resilience, not just in what they do within their business, but within their staff as a whole, to keep their staff fully informed and say, listen, we've got no choice to do this, but be assured as soon as we're back up and running, we will be doing this, 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 and this, so that everyone's hitting the ground running.
Yeah, I think the difficulty with somewhere like the Isle of Man was they only had 3 weeks and then it was a circuit break. I was going to ask the question, when do you start to build resilience? I look at it from a financial perspective, trying to get money in the bank so that we're not having to borrow. But I also think, 3 weeks of trading, and they probably haven't finished or had the first training course that we're talking about. It's a real challenge right now to start building and planning resilience when there's not enough time to really build the resilience up. As an example of the Isle of Wight was. If I think about it from my own business perspective, 160 staff. To actually prepare the 160 staff and 11 different hospitality venues in 3 weeks would be a miracle, and I doubt it would happen. When does resilience start? Has anyone got any thoughts on?
Yeah, Steve,
on,
one thing I'd say, especially as several of those staff will potentially have moved on. So you're in a recruitment phase as well, because a lot of them will have been, will have gone elsewhere, will have moved areas, will have moved back in with parents in different areas, all sorts of different things like that. So these are dynamics that we've never had presented before. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. And the supply chain also is affecting that resilience, because the aviation industry that supports our sectors and other sectors, engineering and manufacturing and everything, they've all got to build back at some point. And when we're kind of on the straight and narrow, that's the point at which the cash flows and the staff engagement happens, and then you can start to perhaps build resilience, this plan A, B. Eva, have you got an opinion on that?
Yes, I think resilience starts the moment you fail. So because if you don't fail, then you are not exposed to those situations. So I think obviously we need to train ourselves to have a resilience mindset, I would say, and then take that into business. But I think the moment something goes wrong, the way you react to it, that's how you start getting ready for resilience, even if it's unconsciously.
Yeah, definitely. It's a challenge to that decision on when, but actually I have to say, I'd imagine for many businesses that are still trading and open now, even in a virtual sense, the minute we came through March and April and everything became an online or working from home, we were building resilience from the start. You're right. As soon as it happened, there was resilience building. It's that long-term resilience for the next big thing that becomes, when is that? Is it a circuit break? Is that the next big thing? Because it's the next big chunk of closure that's going to happen, or what are we planning resilience for? Is it short, medium or long term, and how do you effectively do that? Go on, Roger, have you got something? You're on mute. Famous words. Still on mute. Still talking. Go on then.
I was talking to myself then. As usual. Yeah, it's a dynamic process, isn't it? We've learnt so far from COVID-19 and the elements of that. We're also learning from Brexit, don't forget. We've got a double whammy here that's affecting the resilience and the continuity of businesses. The question is to differentiate between continuity. Short-term actions are staying in business, making sure we have continuity in what we're doing and being able to do it. And looking to the situation where, as you said, Guy, companies suddenly lock down, they need to think about what can they do through innovation to maintain themselves and keep going. When does it start looking at resilience? Well, you start as quick as you can, but that's more of trying to, from your experience, develop what could be the scenarios that are going to affect your business. And I think that comes back to a bit of role play, maybe role play within the company, between the people who own the company, to understand what scenarios could affect our business. So maybe the first thing to start doing in any business is to put a checklist down. What affects us? Under the current climate, we've got staff moving away. I'm sure we have. Where do we go from there? We've got financial problems. Where do we go from there? How in the longer term, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months out, do we mitigate that?
Guy.
Yeah, because it's like what you're talking about there is exposure to various different parts of the business, and exposure is completely linked to resilience. So if you can narrow down the areas that you're potentially exposed, then and make yourselves more resilient in those, then you've got more bandwidth to work on the ones where you've got the higher, I guess, susceptibility to risk, and you need to make yourselves more resilient in those 2 or 3 things. It's all about, kind of like strengthening and shoring up bits of the wall where the really, really big hole you can put all your efforts into. That's a terrible analogy, but that was the best I could do.
No, don't worry. I was just also thinking back to when we started talking about risk and resilience, and we talked about the common practices that we've already developed around washing hands, socially distancing, and face masks. When we planned this session originally, the roadmap hadn't been announced, and what shocked me about resilience from a resilience point of view in the roadmap was effectively from the 21st of June, we were kind of going cold turkey with some of these, the social distance, the face mask and the hand sanitizers. And I started to plan recovery for our businesses last week. And I started to ask the questions like, are we removing the hand sanitizers? Are we taking the screens away? Are we, like, all of a sudden, it feels like we're going from 100 to 0 again, the other way around. And we talked about it, cultural changes need to be for the long term. Has anyone got any thoughts around, I suppose, this agoraphobia that perhaps some of us have developed, where we don't want to be within a metre of the table next to us, but businesses have an opportunity to, without the guidance from the 21st of June, really consider the fact that their restaurants can go back to full capacity and they don't have to have these awful screens on their reception desks, and they can make it all look pretty again in their businesses. Has anyone got any thoughts about kind of the road ahead in that resilience again? Because you're kind of exposed to risk in that way. From the 21st of June, if we're kind of going back to normal without those sorts of practices, we've talked about it from a cultural perspective becoming a long-term thing. Is that in our future, or is it kind of being taken away from us? I've got a few yeses. Roger?
Well, we all looked at the plan that's been and the route map that's been put forward. The trouble is it's got all the various situations in it that allow for other things to happen. It's got many loopholes. In thinking about what you're going to do on a resilience point of view here, is it wise to suddenly drop all the cultural changes that have been introduced? I would have thought possibly not, because there are many of the population now who are familiar with masks, who are familiar with the hand washing and distancing. You go to China, you go to Japan, they all wear masks when they aren't very well. Are we going to be all well by the time we come to July the 21st? Doubtful. So this is, again, measuring the risk opportunity in your experiences and looking at the resilience your business has to develop under those conditions. And I would have thought, from what you've said, bearing in mind the cultural changes that are going to occur in that direction and have occurred, the other cultural change, of course, when considering any business, are we working in an office or are we working from home? Or do we have a combination? This is the history, this is the experience that we now have to apply to our business thinking moving forward from June onwards.
Is this not where we trip, though, because it's open to interpretation and managing expectation, Guy?
I think one of the things is it's described as a roadmap. Yeah. What it's never been described as is a road. You know, a road is a static, fixed thing that is there. It's in the ground. The roadmap, you know, that's something that you might put together when you're designing something. If it's June the 20th or 21st or whenever it is, and then we're not estimating most of the adult population to be fully vaccinated with both vaccines until July, August or September, first vaccine by July, but last vaccine by September, then it strikes me that the June the 21st date is one that's liable to shift. It's shifting sands on that side. And going to your point about whether we should actually ever go back to total cold turkey, no restrictions whatsoever, I'm mindful of two things. Firstly, I have missed, more than anything, I've missed shaking hands with people. You know, I'm a big handshaker. I think it's, you look them in the eye, you shake hands, you say hi, and you've got this connection, you've got this bond. It's very, very, you know, fun. It's fine because we're not face to face at the moment, but I think there'll be a certain amount of change on that when we go back. And then the other thing, I guess, is what happens, and this is going to sound silly, all right? What happens in August if you go to a networking event and someone you're standing beside has got a bit of a cough and cold, just a bit of a summer cold, you know, but they've actually got their vaccination passport and everything like that. Literally, yeah, that is your immediate reaction. You've still got your mask in your pocket, bang, on it goes. So I think there's various things. In order to take the fear factor out of it, which is one of the main things which will mitigate this sort of thing, I think changes will get made nearer the end of this period for all of the social distancing side of things. I don't see that we will ever go back to 100% non-social distancing, ever.
Okay, big statement. I think after the 21st, this is the difference when you own a business and you're trying to look at the guidance and plan how you're reopening or you're going back to normal. Roger mentioned about working from home in the office. It might be what you want to do as an individual, but as a business, they may need you to go back to the office. And actually, in terms of the guidance as it stands, and it's not a million miles away and we're planning now, it's back to normal. You don't have to socially distance anything. Desks, chairs, tables, no masks, no sanitizer. It doesn't say you have to. So again, it's down to interpretation and expectation of individual, but it's going to create a lot of HR issues when it comes to, well, I don't want to work from the office. In a hotel world, I have to go to the hotel. I can't work from home. I have guests to look after. We have products, and if you worked in a factory, you have products on conveyor belts. I think if you're in a office-based role that can be done from home, you're in a different mindset. But as an employee, I have this kind of balancing act of I have to go into work to look after customers. And I want to feel safe. But is that socially distanced hand sanitizers and face masks to make you feel like that, or is it back to normal again? And they're business decisions that business owners are having to make now about how this roadmap reopens them. And it does come down to then, do you want this ghastly first impression of wear a mask signs still up, screens so you can barely see the person serving you? Businesses are making decisions now whether to take that away because it detracts from the experience that we historically have been really good at giving. Great customer experiences, very one-to-one, and we like to shake hands. To be honest, if somebody came and shook my hand in August, I think I'd be a bit like, oh, sanitizer at the ready. And I suppose everyone might feel like that. We'll all be still carrying our little bottles of hand sanitizer. Exactly. So where do we go from here? When it comes to planning, you know, if you own a business and you're thinking about your risks and you're trying to build resilience, what can influence those decisions? I've talked about guidance. That's been a huge influence over how business owners make decisions over the last year. We've almost become so used to being told what to do that come June the 21st, when we're not being told what to do, what do we think businesses will actually go on to do and take it seriously? Will they even consider stress testing, putting more money away in case this happens again? Or is there an element of, in a couple of years, it'll all be forgotten and it was just a terrible time in history and we've all forgotten about it? What about our future generations that my kids may not remember it by the time they get a job? How do we evolve things to remind them of what happened? And this is why we've built risk and resilience. I'm asking quite a few questions there. Anyone got any opinions on those?
I have, but I'll let someone else go first.
How about the Paul and Hannah? Have you got any thoughts on what we've said so far? Go on, Paul.
I'll mute myself. Yeah, I think it's what I sort of seen you, because I sort of joined this company in October. I mean, obviously, and it's a new set of business, so we faced a lot of sort of challenges and being obviously trying to deal with business around the country, it's been very restricted. But I think seeing the way that so many companies obviously have adapted. So I think, you know, it's then looking at your business. Okay, I've always done this, but can I transfer this? You know, us as a business, we deal with roller shutter and garage doors, security devices. But then we looked, okay, we're now gone on to selling products to Amazon. So we're selling that all over the world. in terms of supplying that, and then we're looking at, because our main factory is in Bulgaria, to find out in the industry there's a lack of skilled workforce in terms of fitters, things like that. So we're looking at potentially importing sort of our own fitting development. So I mean, business is based in Bulgaria. Obviously, I'm sort of in the UK operation. My my director's stuck in Bulgaria, hasn't been able to come back since he went over from Christmas. So it's been like left myself into and our colleagues to actually run the business as well. And so yeah, it's certainly created a lot of eye opener. But I think it's always going to have that fear set of, is it going to happen again? I think everyone thinks, well, it's not just, I think even in June, people are going to expect winter's coming again. It's going to start shutting down again. And I think businesses can't just, they've got to take an element of risk for themselves, but also not be wasteful to their customers as well. Like you said, in the hotel side, it'd be nice to obviously remove all these protective screens, etc., and obviously have all the people closed together again. But I think it's the element of, we also still need to have an element of protection, just to obviously, because we don't want it to happen again.
No, you want to be able to see that and feel that as part of your experience. It becomes part of the norm within the world. I was thinking about as you were talking about going on a plane, and during the first lockdown, I remember seeing diagrams of chairs that one faced one way, and one, so we were kind of going back into the world of aviation, perhaps with a different setup in the plane. But I kind of now think a year on, when I did see all those pretty pictures, if they didn't come to fruition, we're just all going to be packed on a plane again in 3s and 6s and however many. And that at some point when we go on holiday in the next couple of years, we'll just be back as sardines in a tin. Those chairs probably won't have changed. Therefore, you're not then aiming to remove fear, because you want fear to exist so that people do think twice, think about their behaviour when they do end up in those sorts of circumstances, whether it's a conference in August on a packed out plane. You want people to remember that fear, so that their own hygiene practices and how they protect themselves becomes individual responsibility. Hannah, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it feeds back into resilience, doesn't it, really? I think it does scare me a bit, the fact that, June the 20th, we all have to wear masks and be 2 meters apart and everything. June the 21st, we can hug and do whatever we like. And I think, thinking of aeroplanes, we had those terrorist attacks years ago, and ever since, there is still the legacy that you can't take more than 100 mils of food on a plane. So why are we not having a long-term legacy of this? The risk of a pandemic, okay, we might have COVID under control potentially, but the risk of another variant of a different disease is still there. So I think as organisations and companies, if the government aren't going to be telling us to put any measures in place, then maybe we should be doing that to protect ourselves, our employees, our customers. And I think, I would like to see people sort of wearing masks a bit more and sanitising and things. So I think we need to sort of take responsibility and continue those for ourselves, really. Okay,
no, good point. Thank you, Hannah. If we go back up to Manor from the kind of the council perspective, and obviously, the guidance and the public services facilities, that's all kind of decisions that you'll make at kind of council level or be influenced by. Where do you stand on kind of how you see it moving forward for you guys as the council?
Probably my colleagues in the environmental services, probably the public health, are better qualified than me to answer that. Obviously, we're following the government guidelines and Public Health England guidelines in terms of how we adapt going forward, and that's obviously going to change, and certainly with the June 21st date approaching us. It's a difficult one. I mean, it is a bit of a finger in the air, seeing what happens as time progresses, the weeks, the month, in the month of April, May. What is the situation going to look like? And that may change as well, and most likely it will. So it's a really difficult one. The council's obviously following central government and Public Health England guidelines, and that those decisions or pass through downwards to a frontline level. So it's really difficult question to answer. But we only, as I said, the weeks and months passes would tell us what it looks like going forward.
And that loops me back round actually to the comment I made earlier, because I've written it down twice now, is when you're trying to plan for business risk and resilience, and the answer is we're waiting for guidance, we're waiting to see what happens, it's really hard to think about what you do in your business, because are you ultimately in control, or have we got to wait till the Friday before we go back to normal again? And it's perhaps the conversation takes a slightly different direction when you don't wait. But then if you don't have to do it, you're forcing customers or products or services into a position where they may not want to do it. Everybody probably wants to answer me on that. So Guy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think there's certain things that you can do to mitigate and level out everything. And I'd use a specific example within your industry, Steve. Yes, it would be lovely to take all the barriers down, to do everything like that. But the longer they're up, the less people notice them. You know, it's like in shops, it's like in supermarkets. Yes, there are barriers at tills on supermarkets now. I don't even notice them. And I think one of the factors there as well is if we don't notice them, one of the great things is for your staff who are sitting behind those reception desks and everything like that, they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of people every day. The mental fatigue without the barrier would be a great deal more than the fact that they've got that there. It's just a mental thing. It's right, I'm still talking to them, I'm still able to serve them, I've still got this little hatch here for everything. But some of my risk is mitigated because of that barrier. And I think there are certain things that we can always keep in place because this is COVID-19. There has already been, or has probably already been somewhere, a COVID-20, and there will be a COVID-21. There's COVIDs every year. It's a respiratory disease. You know, so from that point, I think helping people feel more comfortable with the environments they're in, not just as people, your staff, but as the people who are coming into the environment, is a really, really important thing. The other thing, I loved the thing about air travel. The fact that we'll turn the seats around and you'll all sit facing each other. That's brilliant. Apart from the fact, look up, what's straight above you? You got the little nozzles which put all the air through, and all of the air that's in the whole cabin gets circulated through the whole cabin anyway. So it doesn't matter whether there's one person at one end and one person at the other end of the plane. They're all going to be breathing the same air. And I think that's a bit of misinformation there. So, yeah.
I think it also comes down to the fact that rather than it saying in the roadmap, you don't need to do this anymore, you kind of just want it to just be up to individuals to make that decision, because the minute it says you don't have to, it's the minute when you're trying to please everybody. And for all of us that have got customers and for all of us that have got staff, it's really hard to manage people, whether they're staff or customers, when everything's up to interpretation and own expectation. And we need it probably to just be part of our social norm. We actually, when we talked about it, thought that this was going to become our ongoing resilience, was to just let these new practices continue the way they are. There are obviously the financial resilience to think about, but there's also just the everyday kind of life that we're living in terms of those common practices.
Well, yeah, you can have a company policy. You know, the hotel, your hotel group can have a company policy, and it can be well publicised that we will maintain screens in reception areas for both staff and guests to feel more comfortable. It's kind of like, if you know, is it going to stop someone booking in, whether you've got the screen or not? For some people, it might. They might only want to book online if there's no screens there. That takes that fear out of it. And that's one of the main things we're mitigating here. And it's one of the main things about resilience. It's about lessening people's fear.
Eva, have you got a point on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that we as businesses need to remember that we can also ask our clients how they will be feeling. I know in some cases, depending on the business, might be a bit more difficult, but we can always ask our clients, our employees, and this makes us, it's almost like a marketing exercise sometimes.
Yeah.
Learning about what they feel, and obviously we are not going to please everyone, but meeting people at some place. So yeah, reaching a common understanding and trying to accommodate, that's the word, trying to accommodate each one's feelings, I think.
That's the challenge. Roger, have you had your hand up?
Yeah, I really had a similar sort of approach to Eva. If you look at the hospitality business, or most businesses, and particularly yours, I guess, from the visitor experience, if you make a decision to take away all the protective environment on day one, I wonder how many people would actually turn up to the hotels and the restaurants.
We're going to wait and see.
You have to consider, I think, as you said earlier, we've already got a cultural change taking place. The question is, do we want to continue that cultural change? And probably the answer in most respects could be yes. So therefore, you've got to manage your business in a way that, again, looking at resilience, you've got to keep that cultural understanding and asking your staff, involving your staff and involving your potential visitors in understanding what their desires are to generate your business. Then you will understand how to, or what to put in as a resilience plan. For example, it's a good selling point in aircraft. In China, they now have robots going through aircraft, UVC lighted robots going through aircraft, decontaminating. You can have them going around the hotel. You can see them actually in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. All of those are mechanisms to improve confidence of your clients, which obviously improves confidence and resilience of your business. So again, it comes back to the word we started off. One of them is planning and innovation, and looking at scenarios that would satisfy those particular aspects. Are we going to keep face masks? Well, I can tell you in India, we're not, but we aren't going to shake hands. It's going to be back to the Indian traditional saying, namaste. So already they're making decisions that they will change, and certainly our business is changing its policy. Of course you want to meet people face to face. Of course you want to talk. Of course you want visitors into your hotel. But we need to listen to what's happened and develop that as a plan for resilience for the future. That's my suggestion.
You've answered my next question, which was what are our opportunities? So maybe if we go with that theme, are there any opportunities off the back of this from around the room in terms of risk and resilience? We've got opportunities to build back stronger, to plan for the future, because it's there for us to take. What are people's opinion then if we think about the opportunities that this has presented? Roger's given some great examples there. There's a bit of heritage there as well, though, isn't there, with India, because we go back to, but in our culture, we don't have that kind of history to go back to, unless anyone can correct me. I think we've been a handshake forever and a day. So we would have to adopt someone else's culture, I guess. Is that something that perhaps maybe is the way forward? Go on, Roger.
Well, I'm sorry to come back in again. Well, the people I'm meeting, and believe we do meet a few people, we actually are nodding. We're going to the Japanese approach of at least acknowledging people. And I think it's acknowledgement that we have to look at first of all. Over time, it may change.
Yeah.
I certainly would feel uncomfortable shaking somebody's hand until I'm very sure that we have removed this virus from the planet fundamentally, because international trade-wise, it can happen anywhere, as we've seen, and therefore, again, it's a new approach. Maybe we have to find those new approaches from a number of places within the world.
Thanks, Roger. We've talked about it from I suppose from a very domestic level to a certain degree. I think there's some confidence in the air because of our vaccine rollout, and obviously we are able to have this kind of roadmap that there's an indication there of a semi-normality and whatever that looks like. But actually, when you think about risk and resilience, we're still vulnerable when the world isn't in the same place as perhaps we are. And we were reminded by that by Van Tam earlier in the week when everyone was asking about when can I go abroad, and he was saying, well, when they want you to go abroad, because they're not where we are yet, and it goes both ways. And I suppose when it comes to building back and building risk and resilience in your business, for those that aren't just thinking about service and delivery on a local level, when you think about international relationships, many people used to do business by getting on a plane and traveling the world on a weekly basis. That's how business was done. They're no doubt doing it online. Guy, any thoughts on that?
I used to travel around Europe and the world for several years, well, for more years than I can care to remember, doing business, shaking people's hands. The first point I'd make is that, you know, we're never going to be COVID free. You know, the government has said that they can never plan for the UK to be fully COVID free. There will always be, whether it's new variants or people who won't be vaccinated or various different things. So we're always going to have to live with this. And one of the things behind that, it goes back to the first thing I said about having plan A, plan B, plan C, and linking what you do to those 2 or 3 different plans and developing your business according to, right, if I can't do what I really want to do, not what is my side hustle, but what do I need to develop to make sure that I'm between plans B and C so that I can be profitable and providing a service to other people who require it as well. So for instance, Ava, with the translation side of things and everything, we need to try and develop an awful lot of different ways of working that are almost virus proof. And there are certain sectors that is never going to be possible in. Hospitality is one of them. You know, if a lockdown happens, we all know that there are great swathes of sectors that by necessity will just shut down. But there will be other things that people within hospitality, which they will try and start to plan for beyond that as well. And that's one of the things to look really, really far-sighted at. Is hospitality ever going to be in a similar position again to the way it was in March last year? And how do we plan and how do we make sure that some of the spaces we have within hospitality are utilised for these things that we need for plans B and C? That for me is resilience. It's long-term forward strategy to make sure that, you know, we just had, for a lot of people, really quite a good budget yesterday. It wasn't so good in other areas, but it's supporting a lot of people who are going to be planning much further down the line. But we can't always plan to do what we're doing before and hoping that we're going to just build back stronger, because it's just not going to be possible.
No. There's an air of being in survival mode for so long, and then you start to actually plan. What would be really interesting, and I suppose as we come to the end of the session, is to maybe pick this back up again in May when we're a few more months down the line in this roadmap and this way out. And it'd be interesting to perhaps feedback on businesses' risk and resilience planning, because by putting together a reopening plan, we're trying to build in risk and resilience. And the reason why I bring hospitality to the forefront is because it's cost so much money in terms of making it sustainable for the future. That £240 billion spend has been highlighted as this sector has driven an awful lot of damage because of its inability to continue to provide service and have to be closed. And I think it's a really important sector to focus on, because otherwise we're going to end with a £240 billion bill every time we have to do this. And if anything, it's the one sector, and in the supply chain, you know, whether you're buying food, getting on a plane, aviation, you're manufacturing that plane, even cars. People need cars to go on holiday. We don't need a car to not go on holiday, certainly on domestic. The whole ripple effect of our sector being shut causes a wave of issues. And how does everyone become, therefore, business and resilient if the ripple effect falls both ways, if we have to shut down? Any questions from the room that we haven't, any subjects or anything we haven't discussed today, anything we've missed? No. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's been an interesting conversation at a weird point in time, given that the roadmap's so fresh and we're still a long way from that 21st of June date. But certainly what will be interesting is to perhaps see where we are in May when we reconvene and see what the way forward is from there. But the pointers to take away today are plan, preparation, read the guidance, interpret it in your own way and plan around it.